So the two barriers to success on new products. The first barrier is time. So McKinsey, my former colleagues at McKinsey, did a study about 6 years ago where they found that there's an inverse relationship between the cycle time it takes to get a new product into market and success. Or said another way, the longer you take to get a product into the marketplace, the less likely you're going to be that that product will be successful. And why is that? I was talking about this with a friend of mine who is an artist. And she said, that's really, actually she's a potter. She said, it's really interesting. The less time I take with my art, the better it is. And that's because you're tapping into the non-conscious. And the longer you take to think about this stuff, the more rational and the more distance you get from all that wonderful instinct that drives creativity and innovation. So an example talked about last night at dinner is Jackson Pollock. This man, which many would say is a genius as opposed to creative expressionism, literally poured paint on canvas and expressed his innermost thinking by literally dripping paint on a canvas instantaneously. And I saw this at the Tate when I was in the UK, and if you read the first line in the placard under the painting, Pollock's aim was to work directly from his unconscious to this radical process. So here's an artist who said, I want to really express that part that's at the bottom of the iceberg, and the best way to do that is just move really quickly and let it flow. Now some of us might argue that's not art. A lot of us are spending a lot of money. This particular painting, I think, sold for a record amount of money, and it was something in the order of $800 million or something. It was just a lot of money. So that's this notion of speed is really giving us the ability to tap into what's motivating us non-consciously. Now that's at an individual level. Imagine if Jackson Pollock had to work inside a large corporation over 2 years to decide if this was a piece of art or not. So now not only are we having the individual rational overtaking it, but we've got a committee overtaking it. I worked on a new product for Kraft for 3 years. Honestly, at the end of those three years, I couldn't tell you what the original idea was. There were so many nips and tucks that we did to this idea that it was now incrementalism. So somebody said we couldn't make it, so then we made this, and then so et cetera. So the first thing I urge all of you to do if you're going to enhance the productivity of your innovation is move fast. Move so fast that you're not obscuring the value of the non-conscious thinking. And the second thing that I urge you to do is what I call reclaim the tails. Traditional research was designed to identify the really bad ideas. And the thinking was that it's expensive to launch a new product. And so what I want to do is weed out the products that are not going to be successful very quickly. And to be honest, as best as I can tell, it does this brilliantly. But there's one consequence that nobody's talking about, which is to a consumer, a bad idea looks almost identical to a fantastic idea. Because it's strange, I've never seen it before, I don't exactly know what to do with it. And I talked about jobs earlier, but if you think about the people who are doing the most impressive innovation right now, they are not pre-testing. The iPhone 4, I guess it's called the 4S, had no consumer testing prior to its launch, nor did the iPad, nor did the iPhone. And in fact, if you had tested with me the iPod, I would have said, I am perfectly happy with my collection of 3,000 discs, and I have a disc player in every place I live, and I have total access to my music. Why would I need this thing? Now I have those same number of discs that I haven't touched in 3 years. So the metaphor I use, if any of you are aware of antidepressive drugs, so if somebody's clinically depressed, and if it gets bad enough, a physician will prescribe an antidepressive drug. And what the drug does is it basically narrows the span of emotion that you're capable of feeling. So it eliminates the bottom tail, and it makes you feel considerably less depressed. The problem is it also eliminates the top tail. You're not able to feel the same level of joy and excitement and all those other wonderful positive emotions as you used to be, but it gets you nicely in that middle. And the reason why compliance with antidepressive drugs is so low is people forget how bad they felt and they really miss those highs. And so they take themselves off the drug in order to re-experience those highs. That's exactly what traditional research is doing with new products. And so if you eliminate the bottom and you eliminate the top, what you're left with is a bunch of mediocrity. And the reason why 1 out of 10 succeeds is because every once in a while you're lucky enough to end up with an idea that's just at the top of the curve, and you launch it and it works. But all the norms and all the averages are basically saying that the ideas in my universe are basically mediocre ideas. And I don't know how many of you have tested ideas traditionally and broke the bank, but I pretty much guarantee you that it's less than 10% of the time. So what we set out to do is say, how do we reclaim the tail, the top tail, and how do we do that very, very quickly so we can encourage clients to move through the development cycle pretty quickly. So we developed this process we call Mind Measure that's irrelevant, but basically we ask people on a web-based latency test to tell us 3 things. For a bunch of concepts which are white card and unbranded, we ask people to say on a battery of preference measures, how do you react to this non-consciously? Do you like the idea or don't you? And the theory is that I am much more likely to respond to a brand new idea like the iPad non-consciously favorably than I would consciously, because I don't have to answer the question, what would I do with it? I'm just answering the question, do I think it's cool? And how many things do we buy that are cool? I'm running this on a Mac. I paid 30% more for this computer. I can give you all sorts of reasons why, but the bottom line is it's cool. And as a complete aside, I was at Lenovo presenting something when I was at Interbrand, and the head of product development grabbed my Mac and started touching it, which was very strange. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, you see these screws that are completely beveled? We can do that, we just don't. And it was that attention to detail that makes the Mac cool and the Lenovo a tool. And so the first thing we do is preference, and I'll show you that in a minute. The second thing we do is brand fit, again, non-consciously. So which of these ideas fits your brand the best? And the idea being there that if you're leveraging an existing brand, the way to maximize the leverage is to do something that people think fits with what your equities are. And the last part is what I call quantitative qualitative. And it's actually very similar to something you just saw, but it's matching people's reaction to the concept to a battery of images that we've tested globally and we know the emotional content. And so we can diagnose why people are picking the answers they're picking by actually diving much more deeply into what's the emotions that are driving this. So let me just show you this very, very quickly. It's large sample size, 400. The preference battery is you ask people paired comparison on a computer screen very quickly. Now that you've read the concept, do you like it or don't you like it? Do you think it's for you or don't you think it's for you, etc. And what you get for each concept is a spider chart that not only measures overall preference, which is simply the additive score, but gives you a profile of, at a non-conscious level, how are people really responding to this concept. So this particular profile is actually fascinating, and I wish I could explain to you why. But it scored very, very high on it's a product I need, and it scored very high on it's a product I like, and it's even seen as cool. What it didn't do so well on is something that I would buy and something that I would recommend. So traditionally, we would probably have concluded that this is a really good idea, but there's something going on here that warrants further exploration, which is, why is it you think it's actually a pretty nifty idea, but it's not something you'd actually purchase? And then the next part of this is fit. So now what you do is take the same concept, unbranded, and you show a battery of brands, let's say 6, in randomly assigned order. So I'll read the concept, and then I'll see Apple versus Google, Google versus Apple, HP versus whatever. And all we're asking people to do is click on the brand you think fits the concept. And again, we're measuring speed. And what that enables you to do is plot out how did the concept do versus how does it fit with the brand. So concept E here is by far the most preferred brand. And in traditional way of thinking about it, that's probably most preferred concept. That's probably the one that you would launch. But concept D was almost identical in preference, but fit the brand a whole lot more closely. And so I would argue that all things being equal, you're probably better off launching D than you are E. So it's a really good idea, and at a non-conscious level, people really associate it strongly with your brand. And finally, as I said, we have an image bank that we know the content. And when I say images, these are just images we've tested where that are essentially broad content. And in this particular case, the consumer or the respondent saw the same image, same 24 images for each of the concepts. And what the data is outputting is here's the association of each image with each concept. And so you look at this, and it's basically a data-driven montage. And the top one is you're laying out the 24 images linearly in terms of what pictures are most strongly associated with the concept. And you get to do the analytics of comparing which images are in common, which images are different. And the notion is, and this is where the qualitative comes in with this science of semiotics, which is basically revealing the unseen, is what is the consumer really telling us in terms of what's the emotional content that is getting the response that they're getting. So the net of all this is that, and this is just one of multiple tools, but I thought I would show it to you as an example of if we have a problem, which is that innovation is not as productive as it needs to be. And by the way, the people who we are finding are the most interested in this are R&D people who are just sick and tired of spending their lives inventing really cool things and watching marketers blow it. And they're desperate for other ways to evaluate their ideas so that more of the great ideas that they're developing in the laboratory actually get exposed to the consumer in the marketplace. So I had a whole other section here, but I decided to rather give the time to questions and answers. And where I would close is to say back to what you see affects what you do, is if you use these tools and some of the other tools you're going to hear about today, what you will do is you'll see more, you'll see differently, and then you'll do better. Thank you.